I had a pretty prestigious like amateur career coming up. Was on, the junior Olympic team for Team USA. We played down in Barquisimeto, Venezuela. We won a gold medal down there. I was in the athletic, like All-American high school game, all that kind of stuff. So I had like, kind of a lot of like hype going into the draft in high school. And, but my senior year, I hurt my hand. I broke a bone in my hand and I didn't hit really at all. So there was this kind of question mark about what's going on. So the day before the draft, I get two different calls from two different teams, basically giving me offers like, hey, if we draft you tomorrow here, will you sign for this? And both times I said no. I had a very specific number that I thought was worth skipping my college, education, college experience. And they said no, but it's difficult, man, because like I was 18 years old and I had two teams offering me, over $1 million to go places. It's like when you're 18, I think sometimes it helps when you're that young because you don't fully grasp the concept of how much money that is, right? I mean, I think it'd be a lot more difficult of a choice at 30 than it was at 18. At 18, you're young and you've got this sort of like, huge naive confidence about, everything that's going to work out perfectly. So you're like, like whatever, I'll make more than that.
Especially because it's worked out so perfectly leading up to that point.
100%, right? I had nothing, in my past that would, contradict that things were just going to keep on, building and growing the right way. So I said no to those and ended up going to Clemson. I played there for 3 years and, just worked hard, got better, got bigger, stronger, just did the things that I thought I was going to do and worked out well and ended up getting picked in the first round by the Rays in 2012.
Leading up to like your retirement. So like, is it something that you saw coming?
My descent towards retirement happened like in the blink of an eye, happened super fast. I was like right in the middle of my career, right about 2015, I was like at the peak. Like I was, a really high prospect in baseball. I don't know if you can see in the back of there, but that was like a USA jersey is like my futures game jersey, which if you don't know what the futures game is, the futures game in the MLB is basically like the all-star game of the entire minor leagues.
Yeah.
So you're considered one of like the best, 40 players in all of minor league baseball at the time. And so I was hitting cleanup in the futures game in 2015 with a lineup full of like Aaron Judge, Kyle Schwarber, Michael Conforto, Trey Turner, Trevor, like a lot of superstars in the major leagues right now. I was like right in the middle of that lineup, like all of them, right? And so I had this, crazy trajectory booming in 15 and then like kind of in the blink of an eye, everything like really changed. The very next year in 16, I got traded to Seattle and then like I got waived and DFA'd, which is basically just like kind of taken off the roster a bunch of different times just for a bunch of different like business decisions and stuff like that. And things from that moment like really digressed really quickly. And it's one of those things that I never really thought about retiring until last year in 2019, when I was a minor league free agent after the 2018 season, and I was calling around trying to get a job and trying to get a baseball job, trying to get like a roster spot on all these places, and I wasn't getting any calls, like none, zero. I had a really poor year in 2018. I tried to do some things mechanically with like my swing and stuff like that. It backfired. I had a really bad year, and I didn't get any offers, not a single one. It felt like everything happened really quick, and then I was in independent baseball in 2019, which is basically where guys that aren't affiliated with 30 teams, they go to basically play to get one more shot, try to get back in. And after I played well and after the season was over, still getting any calls, I at least came out of it with a better perspective. And I felt like I'd done all the things that I could have done to try to get back and exhausted all the options. So I felt comfortable at that time being like, you know what, like I'm okay to move on, because there was a long time where that wasn't the case. And I never felt like I was going to be able to walk away from baseball. And I think because everything happened really quick, that was harder for me to accept. But once I got like this past year in 2019, I think is over the course of that year, it sort of grew on me and became like in my head, it was like I became okay with stepping away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then it sounds like it just like you realize how much of a business it actually is once you're going back and forth. Like you said, because of the business decisions, it's crazy. They don't really care about you. They care about the business, the money at the end of the day.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
What would you say you struggled most with after you decided that you were going to retire?
Like I described earlier, like in 2019, when I was in independent baseball, that was like, I sort of saw the end coming. So I kind of had some time to prepare for it a little bit. I think if I just would have stopped cold turkey in 18 and like not try to pursue one more opportunity, I think I would have had a much harder transition. But something I struggled with, at least throughout that year, to me, I consider that me like easing into retirement, right? Like I knew that I was still playing, but I kind of knew there wasn't really an opportunity that was coming. It was sort of a long shot. So it was kind of easing into that. So what I struggled with the most was just sort of identity, right? Because since I don't know about you, but I was one of those kids when, from the moment I could stand up, I was being groomed to be a baseball player, right? Like literally the moment I could stand, I had like a wiffle ball bat in my hands,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like smacking wiffle balls in like my parents' basement since like literally the moment I could walk. And so baseball to me had been my entire identity for my entire life. I had sacrificed, you know, a lot of like very normal middle school, high school, college experiences. I sacrificed for the pursuit of baseball. So I felt very tied to my identity as a baseball player. And honestly, that affected me a lot during my playing career, because I felt like if I wasn't playing well at the time, then I wasn't, you know, I was less of a, you know, my value as a person was less if I wasn't, if I didn't get a hit that day, like I was less of a person than if I went 4 for 4 that day. Right. So I think I struggled with that a lot in terms of when I retired, like, okay, I'm done with baseball. Like that's never happening again. Like who am I if I'm not that? Right. So I think that was probably the biggest, the biggest change is trying to get comfortable with this fact that like, yes, this will always be who you were, but who are you now, and what defines you now, and what is it that you know makes you operate at a core level without this. So I think that was probably um, the biggest hurdle for sure.
What would you say like you did to overcome that? Like what helped you most get through like that identity crisis?
I worked with like a mental skills, mental performance coach throughout the back end of my career, because I was dealing with a lot of these issues at the back end, especially the closer you get to the major leagues, the more and more pressure and anxiety you feel about like trying to grasp this like this shiny obtainable goal up here. You know what I mean? That sometimes is not even in your
You spent
control.
a lot of time in AAA too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. So I was right there for a lot of my
Right there, yeah.
almost most of my career spent like right within I'm one phone call away from being in the major leagues for the most of my career was spent right there.
Yeah.
And to me, I always talk about like if people you know don't know much about baseball, to me AAA is by far the most challenging level of baseball because you're so close and you feel like you are good enough to be in the major leagues, and it's just whether or not they decide they want you there or not. You know what I mean? Like you could change places with someone in the major leagues, and they wouldn't miss a beat. You'd be just as competitive. You'd be everything would go the exact same, right? Like you are very interchangeable in terms of skill and talent as the person above you. It's just about whether or not you catch that break or they want to call you up or do whatever. So to me, it's a very challenging place to be. And I was talking to this mental performance coach about how to sort of deal with this, because I'd be going home after games, whether it's in a hotel room on the road or at your apartment back at home, and it would just sit and stew in it all night, man. And it just like that would just compile into the next day, and the next day, and the next day, made the pressure and anxiety worse. And she talked about finding interests, finding hobbies, dedicating more of your time and your energy and your mental focus to tasks that are unrelated to baseball and completely unrelated, right? So one thing that she talked to me about was just exploring things, just try things, try anything. And, I think a lot of people, they're not 100% positive what it is that they're even passionate about, if they have interests outside of some of the things they do, but you'll never find it unless you actually actively go seek things out. So I tried a bunch of different things at first. I tried learning how to code. So I was trying to teach myself, coding languages and stuff. I felt like I learned after a little bit that just really wasn't for me. I tried, what else I tried? I tried a couple different things. I'm like, it's crossing my mind right now. It's not crossing my mind like stuff I tried, but I searched for a little bit of time about what I wanted, like what I could find that I had interest in. And then one day I just started writing. And at first I was writing just more of like journal level stuff, just sort of like getting my thoughts out from the day onto the page. And this was my way of like, okay, let's get all this stuff out. Once we get on the page, then we can move on to something else. But it sort of turned into like writing stories and creating like fictional things or whatever. So I just started writing one day, and I really enjoyed it. And I found it super therapeutic and cathartic. And I just kept doing it every single night. And I looked up at the end of the year and I had this like 400-page book written. I was like, oh, damn, sick. Like I really had no intention of doing it. And I think something like that gave me an interest and a passion to, and something that I could latch onto identity wise, that like, if I had a poor game or whatever, that this, I still had this. And this was something that was like so unique and different compared to what I was doing, that made me feel like, hey, like I'm capable of redefining myself if this doesn't work out. You know what I mean? And I think allowing yourself that thought, I think relieves so much pressure. I had a veteran teammate of mine in 2016 tell me, if you can make your sport your hobby, then you're going to be a lot better. So instead of thinking of it, your sport as like your job, if you can make your sport your hobby and you're super passionate and your energy is almost more dedicated to something else, you're going to be a lot better because the pressure and anxiety is just not there. And I think that translates really well to when you're transitioning into, post playing.
Yeah. And I mean, especially for baseball where it's like 99% of the game is mental,
100%.
So if you could do it again, I mean, I guess you're still kind of going through it, but like, is there anything you would change while you're transitioning? Like while you were transitioning?
I'm a big believer in the decisions you make lead you, into a path that's, where you're supposed to be. I'm not saying like everything happens for a reason or whatever, but I'm saying like you make decisions and you learn from them and you grow from them. And then you apply everything that you just did in the past and you apply it to things that are going to be happening in the present and the future. So realistically, it's like, yeah, of course there's, you can look back on things and always be like, I wish I would have done this. Maybe I would have been more successful at this. But at the end of the day, not really, man, because I'm happy in where I'm at and I like kind of the route that I'm taking. And, things haven't obviously gone perfectly. I have plenty of days where I wonder if I'm an idiot for stepping away, if I should have just continued to grind at this at baseball until I literally just like can't walk anymore. I have those thoughts all the time. No matter how well adjusted I feel, I don't think you'll ever escape that sort of that little thought because, we've just dedicated so much of our lives to this. But realistically, no, man, like I don't think I would change too much. Like I think like I said, like I think I was fortunate that I had this easing out of my career process. I think if I would be giving advice to anyone that's like abruptly stopped what they're doing, I would say like, man, just focus on finding things that you enjoy and that you're passionate about now while you're transitioning out of this, because, those are the things that's going to help you, number one, come to terms with you being done. Number two, give you a better perspective on what you've accomplished in your career. Because I think that's a lot of things that as athletes, especially athletes that are, extremely successful, a lot of them, and what they have in common is that they're just very critical of themselves and very critical of their performance and their achievements and their career and stuff like that. And a lot of times, we lose perspective as athletes because we are surrounded by other people accomplishing very similar things. You don't realize if you take a step back that there's, what you've accomplished is incredible. And so that was something that I had to come to terms with. I mean, like I made it to the major leagues. I played in the major leagues in 2015 to 2016. Would I have loved to have a longer and more successful career in the major leagues? Obviously, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But for the longest time, I wasn't all that proud of that accomplishment because I was surrounded by, MLB superstars, guys that played for 10, 20 years and made, $200 million. And I felt, like a failure compared to these guys. When I take a step back and I look in perspective, I think, okay, there's only been 19,200 people that have ever played in the major leagues. And there's only 1% of 1%. So it's like, I think finding some of these things that, you can, have some passion towards and devote energy to, I think helps remove you from your world that you were in and place you in this world so that you can look back on the things that you have accomplished, feel proud of your achievements. And I think once you feel like a pride in the things that you've accomplished in your past, it's much easier to accept and begin, properly transitioning into what comes next.
In my opinion, that's the best way you got to look at it. That's perfect. So where were you at? Where would you say you were at, like, emotionally? Like, where was your head at during this?
It was really tough, man. Like, it's tough. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say it's not tough. I mean, it's really, really hard. And it took me a long time to finally say, I think there was a point in the season in 2019, maybe about 3 weeks or so before the end of the season, that I finally decided, like, hey, when this year's done, I'm done. A lot of that season leading up to it was like, I think this is going to be it. But, right, there's always that little bit of a nugget at the end, like, hey, if someone calls, like, let's go, right? I think 3 weeks before the end of the season, I said, you know what? Like, I think this is it. I think I'm done. After the season's over, like, I'm going to move on. And everything leading up to that point was really, really tough. But those last 3 weeks were, like, super liberating, honestly. Like, I had made this decision and I was about to move on. And yes, it was tough to know that these are your last games. It was also liberating and freeing and so enjoyable to, like, experience these last couple weeks of playing just for the sake of doing what you love for the last time. Right. So it was really difficult when I played that last game and I knew the last out was made and I'll never step foot on a field again. That was hard, right? I sat on the bench and I had buddies with me who were retiring too, and we freaking cried and we hugged and it was great. But it was as tough as it was also, like, kind of beautiful without getting super cheesy. It was I don't know, man. It was, you look at it and you start to think about, like, everything that led up to this, all the memories you had and all these things going on. And, like, it was difficult to accept, but I felt like once I did accept it, it was, kind of a breathtaking experience, honestly.
Like, you were able to talk about it with, like, your teammates and stuff, because I know you said earlier, like, you're surrounded by 20 superstars, so was
Right.
it something you were able to talk about, or, like, was it like, would you say it was, like, a tough thing to, like, talk about with other players?
The outlook I have right now is not the outlook I had 3 years ago, right? I was in a really bad place mentally, in 17 and 18, when I was still, in AAA and affiliated ball and trying desperately to get back. And, it was really difficult. And I don't know if I could have talked to too many teammates that weren't guys that I was, like, super, super, super close with, about it, because honestly, I think deep down, I didn't even want to verbalize that, like, that was a possibility, right? Like, to me, I was very bullheaded in, like, I'm going to figure this out. Like, we're going to keep, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't really allow this, like, thought of, you might be getting close to being done to kind of, like, enter my head until, I went to that, like, intermediate, that, like, little bridge year in 19. So if we had this interview, in between 2018 and 19, I think the interview would go a lot different. And I think it would be, honestly, way more cynical and negative, because I was just in a different place. And I think my perspective is much cleaner now, because of some of these, like, the past year and some change of transitioning and growing and learning. But yeah, I think it can be very difficult, but I do think it's very beneficial, right? If you can find guys that you trust, I say guys as a general term, right? For any athlete, right? If you can find people, like, teammates of yours that you trust and you connect with, and you feel like if you open up to them that they're going to be responsive to that, I think it's super helpful, because I think a lot of times as athletes, we sort of shy away from opening up about that. And I think sometimes that builds and festers a little bit. And I think being open about that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it. Do it, like, get it out there. And I think that being vocal about it will help you, have less anxiety and pressure and like, stress during your playing times. And it's going to help you transition easier afterwards too, because you've gone through this gradual process of acceptance and pride and transition that we've talked about.
So what about from, like, your family? Like, were you receiving support from them at all, or from maybe like former coaches, or really anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I had great support from my family for it. I mean, I remember telling them that I was going to be done, and they were definitely between my wife and my parents and in-laws and coaches and uncles and aunts and grandparents and everything. I mean, I had a lot of support from them, and they were a big reason um, why I was able to like look back on some of my career and have pride that helped me move on. Because at the time, when I would talk negatively about my career and they would try to essentially convince me otherwise, to think otherwise, I'd be like, you guys just don't get it. You don't get it. Like, you're not in here. Like, you're not part of this. Like, you don't really get it. Like, and at the end of the day, it's like we're the ones that don't get it, right? Because they're the ones that are outside of this bubble, and they can see the forest for the trees. We're in the middle of it. We can't see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that obviously any support system that you have, trusting to lean on them is huge, right? And so some people have a huge support system and some people don't have any. But I think obviously the bigger you can build your net, the easier it is to kind of lean and fall on.
I appreciate your time for sure. That's you're definitely gonna, I feel like definitely gonna help some people down the road. I mean, if not anyone, just myself personally. I wish you the best of luck with your book coming out soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.